Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host ThatCreepyPastaGuy, and today we're going to be looking at a story simply known as the Clifton Underground. I was originally going to do something else, but after looking at the page for this, it seems that they actually have some proper evidence for this. And as I do the narration, I will be showing you the pictures accompanying the information that it's showing. But before we go into the story, I would like to promote two channels that I think are exemplar and something that you might enjoy. The first one is ThatCreepyPastaGuy. You can find him linked down below or annotated right there above. Or if you want to do pretty much the same thing, you can subscribe to his twin brother, I shit you not. And he is simply known as Insomniac. I don't know why, because he is weird, but nonetheless, you can click on his channel right there. With that being said, sit back, relax, turn the lights down, and prepare to be scared. This is Creepypastas. Hello. You may not know me, and to be honest, my name is unimportant for right now. What is important is that I give you a little bit of background information on the story I'm about to tell. The town of Clifton Forge lies in the western region of Virginia, near Georgia-Washington National Forest. The town came to be thanks to the railroad business, and back in the day, it thrived like no other. Now the town is slowly dying. Walking up and down the main streets, one can see the closed down shops or businesses that eventually died out due to the town's dwindling population. I visit a bed and breakfast in Bath City, Virginia, around the same time every year. This little hotel I stay at is roughly a 25-minute drive from Clifton Forge. Several years back, I went with my cousins into Clifton Forge for some particular reason that I cannot remember. I believe it was to pick up some tools from the local hardware store. While exploring the town, I found a really weird and strange tunnel that sat on the side of the road right across from the gas station. My curiosity was at an all-time high, and I convinced one of my cousins to go in and explore it with me. Unfortunately, my other cousin was too afraid and miserable because of the heat to do really anything. And I reluctantly decided not to do any exploring in the tunnel and simply made plans to return at a later date. Now, this is the part of the story where I explain a little bit of my experiences, so to speak. This past year, I returned to Clifton Forge with my cousins with the sole intention of exploring that town. I used the excuse of geocaching to go into the forge, and my cousins willingly took the bait. Eventually, we stumbled across an old tunnel once more, and I urged my cousins to go in until they all agreed because of my constant bitching. And they would do so as long as we went in there with some proper safety equipment, and that is not really an unfair question to, or at least unfair concern to have. I needed to know more about the tunnel. So I went into the gas station across the street and asked one of the clerks at the register this simple question. What's the gated tunnel across the street? The woman was very old and appeared to be dead on the inside. She said nothing. She was of no help. It was actually more than likely she didn't even speak English, as she didn't look to be of American descent. I felt that everyone in the town was gonna act in this way. The majority of the people in the town were far too old or far too apathetic when it came to anything at all. This led me to believe that no one would really care if we entered the tunnel. It was an incredibly stupid thought, but I was desperate and needed to get into that tunnel. My cousins and I left the car in the gas station parking lot and made our way down across the street. I looked across at the entrance, hoping for a way to make it down the stairs and see whatever lay beneath our feet. I discovered an incredibly poor design flaw in the security of the tunnel entrance. It was most likely built in the 1940s or so. So I am simply led to believe that it was something of a Cold War paranoia madness-inducing mistake. The outer walls of the passage cut off around the handrail, going all the way down until it swallowed up the tunnel. This allowed us to just walk around the side and climb under. Once inside, I started running down the stairs until I was close to the bottom, and I realized that I had to wait for my cousins to finish up walking around and down the stairs. I looked up to see one of my cousins, a guy named Jack, was having some issues climbing down. There were a lot of slippery leaves and some piles of rocks in the way. I had my own issues getting through the mess, but my excitement blinded me and blinded my sense of caution. Jack stepped on some sort of old brick wall, and he slipped and fell. The bricks fell with him, and he scraped his leg up pretty badly. I ran back up to see if he was all right. My other cousin, Sarah, almost had the exact same issue. So Jack and I helped her down. Once we were all in, we took a look at Jack's leg. There was some blood, but it was mostly mud and scratches. Not really something to be worried about, something that only thing you needed to really fix was some disinfectant. Jack shrugged it off and urged us to keep on moving, saying he was sore, but his leg wasn't broken or anything. Once we reached the bottom of the stairwell, cold air rushed up and against our bodies. There was a smell of decay about this space as well. I figured that a raccoon must have died nearby. I didn't think that anything terrifying laid further down in the tunnel or anything like that. On the left was a small hallway that led into an empty room for an elevator that went up to the ground level. There was also a mirror on the wall for some reason, and an old sign that read, "Danger, men working on elevator." The elevator doors were welded shut, and there was nothing else in the area. Looking down into the tunnel was simply haunting. It was an empty black void that seemed to go on and on. What the hell was this place? Was this going to lead into an abandoned bomb shelter? Or was it a system of maintenance tunnels that ran underneath the city, left to decay because everyone was too fucking old or just didn't care to work on it? I couldn't help myself but get excited. I'm a horror junkie who used this type of imagery as heroin to the attic. Old rusted pipes lined the right side of the walls and went on forever. There were puddles from the leaks and just decay, signs of decay everywhere. But it wasn't anything too bad. We started down the passageway with our flashlights and wavering sanity. We walked around for what must have been 30 minutes or so before the ambience began to change. The sound of running water was getting closer, and I suddenly thought that we found an entrance to an underground lake of sorts. As we approached the end of the tunnel, we found a large industrial cave. There was a large creek that split the area into two, and a makeshift bridge had been formed with wooden planks. We were not the first people to have done this. That reassured me that everything was going to be okay, at least at this point. There were no corpses just laying around, or rather, walking around. My morbid sense of humor and common sense don't really function well together. This place was huge. It must have been a quarter mile into each direction. And we weren't exactly sure where to start. There were exterior walls of an old building to our right, and directly across the creek. After a surprisingly simple cross, Jack, Sarah, and I were facing what seemed to be some type of warehouse built in the early 20th century. There was a doorway, a door missing, and it was right in front of us. Jack and Sarah were terrified almost immediately, and I decided that it would be fun to peer inside. There wasn't anything of particular interest. It was just an old, strange cellar that somehow became filled with incredibly old and dingy washing machines. There were at least 20 of them all along, and just tossed about and thrown about the room as if someone didn't know what the fuck to do with them, so they just threw them like trash or into a portal of hell in their own company basement. It almost looked as though someone decided just to hawk out on them, judging by the dents and indents created on these rusted out machines. There seemed to be a few other entrances to the other rooms within the cellar, but the path was blocked by piles of washing machines and mounds of dirt.
If you go in there, Zach, I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back for you.
I considered begging him and Sarah to enter the cellar, but I decided it was simply not worth my time. To our left, however, was something more that heavily intrigued me. A stone ramp that led up to a doorway that had been sealed off. The doorway was completely filled with cinder blocks, except for someone had broken a hole in it and knocked half of them out. I peered inside the hole to see what the surroundings were. A huge wave of hot air blew me back. The area inside was twice as large as the industrial cavern, and the massive tunnel seemed to go on for miles. I pulled my head back and looked at my cousins, ignoring the fact the cinder blocks lay around my feet on the outside of the tunnel were not inside. Sarah raised her eyebrows, and Jack tilted his head with some doubt. It was so big that there were tons of other areas to explore, and we all agreed that it was best to explore that place last. We looked off the ramp and saw that there was a walkway about 10 feet above our heads, and it led to an old metal ladder somewhere. There was a set of metal stairs that ran down to a lower walkway behind it. Something about this area intrigued me as well. I jumped from the stone ramp and made my way around a platform that the ramp led up to. There was an old tree that had been knocked over at one point or another that was laying across the river and directly below the hallway. I thought that maybe, just maybe, if I climbed up on top of there, I would be able to see a possible entrance into the walkway or whatever lay beyond. I began to climb this tree that had grown. I put one foot on the massive trunk and a hand on a stone pillar that lay next to it. And as soon as I put my other foot up to gain balance, I realized that my view was no better than it was before. I decided the next step would be to climb onto the pillar. As I prepared to do this, another rush of hot air blew and flew and hit me. Then I felt a sharp tug on the back of my shirt, and I fell back into the dirt below me. I got to see what the hell the big deal was, and Sarah and Jack were just staring at me like I was an idiot. Hey, why the hell did you pull me down?
We didn't. I was taking pictures. If you don't believe us, I took one as you fell.
Jack handed me his phone, and I looked at the photo. There was nothing except me and gravity. It didn't make sense. The whole concept of some sort of darker energy being in a cavern with me just gave me chills, and I decided it was best if we didn't try to explore that walkway. We decided it was time to leave, except for one last stop. We needed to explore that sweltering tunnel. We walked back up towards the ramp to the doorway, and then I decided to be the first one to go in. I looked in and around, shining my flashlight, hoping to catch something that gave me a clue of which way to go. There was nothing. It was so vast that my light eventually stopped reaching the sections of the room. I turned on the flash of my camera, and it yielded nothing. It wilted out, but I could see on the other side of the room partially. There was a sheet of plywood leading from the doorway to the floor. It was about a 7-foot drop. I slid down on the plywood and told my cousins to wait. I wanted to make sure that everything was safe before I had them go. After all, I did drag them onto this trip. That's when I suddenly got what I'll remember as the worst feeling I've ever had in my entire life. Alarm bells were ringing left and right in my head. I looked over towards the edge of the tunnel, and I could see the side of it. It was a sort of L shape. It came out a little, then turned and kept on going. Right in the corner of the L was something. I could barely even see my light. I couldn't tell if it was just a shadow or trash, but then I felt it look at me. I was able to discern its shape, and it was definitely humanoid. But it was crouching, and whatever it was, it could not have been human. It felt simply too evil. The only other detail I remember was that it seemed to be covered in a skin-tight material that looked black like a trash bag. It was shiny, tight, and slimy in appearance. I quickly thought back to the night terrors I had as a kid, where I would be chased by strange, creepy, slimy things in what seemed to be a white world. I panicked. I told Sarah and Jack not to come down the tunnel at all. I then started to run up the plywood. I stepped on it and slipped down the wall. I placed it up once more and continued to slip. I didn't want to look back at whatever was in the corner, but I was terrified that it was moving towards me. I jumped up and grabbed the ledge. Jack and Sarah reached over and helped pull me up. I climbed out of the doorway as fast as I could. I looked at Sarah and Jack, and I simply said, "We need to leave now." We all ran across the creek, not caring if our shoes got soaked, and then we ran towards the maintenance tunnel. I've never run faster in my entire life. Once we got to the entrance and could see daylight, I felt a sense of relief. I could feel that sense of dread and terror becoming more and more behind me. But I assured myself that it was merely a combination of my adrenaline fear, and fortunately it was. Upon reaching the real world once more, I needed to know what the hell we experienced. Further research into the Clifton Forge revealed that the entire town was built 50 feet above ground level. Due to the creek that ran through the town, this prevented flooding. But whenever the creek rose too high, everything started to make a little bit more sense. I believe the entrance was indeed a maintenance tunnel. The strange hot tunnel or whatever was Hellmouth, as I like to call it, and probably ran under the main street, which went straight through the town for about 5 or so miles. As to why there were old buildings underneath the town was beyond me. I'm sure that they were simply structures that would have been too much of a hassle to destroy when building the Clifton Forge underground. The energy I felt down there was incredibly evil. I didn't even realize it until I resurfaced. Perhaps that is what evil really does to you. It tricks you and lets you know, or lets you wander until it wants to scare you, or rather feed off of you. It certainly succeeded in that, but whatever it wanted to do to me after, I didn't stick around to find out. If you guys are interested, here are some additional pictures of the Clifton Under Forge. This was one creepy town I would never want to visit. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host ThatCreepyReading, and I would like to give you my thoughts and opinions on the story of the Clifton Forge Underground, or as I'm titling this video, One Seriously Fucked Up City. It was a awesome story. I was actually narrating it with a few friends here. The two people who I actually talked about in the intro of this video, ThatCreepyGuy and Insomniac, or Insane, or fuck his name, and we were actually having a nice discussion about creepypastas and why they typically didn't narrate them and went for more true stories. And they said that the reason was because creepypastas usually followed a formula. Well, this one doesn't follow a formula, to be honest. 3 friends go into a creepy cave and shit happens. I mean, I like the general climax where it was just like, oh, fuck this shit, run. That was alright. I wish that they added a little bit more creepy stuff. For example, like maybe they peer into the, washer area and some weird disturbing shit happens, or like they think they saw something but push it back to their mind, something like that. Just something to add, like just a nice slow moment in the middle of the story to make it seem disturbing or creepy, or at least maybe there's evidence of foul play that happened in the tunnel. Either way, I think that would have added to the story a bit. But as it stands, this is actually a unique story because it has photos of everything going on inside it. The thumbnail down to everything I use in the video is actually provided by the author, which simply adds to the authenticity and makes what we're seeing much scarier because when something is a story, it's a story, you can tell yourself it's not real. But when you have actual evidence of something happening. Well, that's a little different. That's something you can't just swash away as nothing. This makes you think that there might be something out there, and something out there may be looking for you. Either way, it was a fantastic story that I would like to reiterate was written by the author known as the Hooded Werewolf. You can also find him as like Zach Zeman or whatever. I'll have a link to his story in the description below so you guys can check it out and maybe tell me how terrible of a job I did at narrating it. Anyway, as usual, I got 2 videos up on screen now. You could always check out The Sneak, one of my favorite narrations I've ever done, or perhaps you'd like to go to an oldie, but a rather classic video. One simply titled, Teachers Wanted Must Love Children, written by Mike McD. Another amazing author who I've also had the chance to talk to. If you're an author who actually has written stories, feel free to contact me and submit me your stories. Remember, they have to be on the Creepypasta Wiki under the copyright clause that allows me to narrate it for commercial purposes because, you know, I need to kind of make a little bit of money off of this so I can actually continue doing it. And speaking of money, you can always support the show financially on patreon.com. Even $1 helps out. I'm serious, guys. The people who are donating are amazing, but I do need a little bit more revenue coming in so I can definitely put a lot more effort into what I'm doing. And this isn't me saying I'm going to stop making videos. I'm saying I'm moving out of my parents' house. I'm getting an actual job. And I really would like to do this as a full-time job, but simply I'm not making the funds just off the channel and off of Patreon in order to do that. That's where you guys come in. You can help me out, and whatever. I might do a Patreon update video later on. Either way, if Patreon isn't your thing, you always can just send me a direct donation through PayPal, and I'll leave my PayPal email in the description. Or if you don't want to support me financially, you can always support me with your view.